So, for those of you who don't know, this is Josh Brom, and he's been with us a couple times already, spoken at this focus class and here twice, and spoke at the downstairs focus class one time. And this is his lovely wife, Hannah, who's joining him today. Everybody say hi, Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
And so, anyway, we have the privilege of having Josh come back again to share with us a little bit at our LifeBridge gathering. So, what I thought we'd do today is just do a little bit of an interview-style Q&A with Josh, and then let you guys, even as we're talking, think up questions that you might want to ask him while he's here. We played a little game at the last focus class where we tried to stump the pro-lifer. So if you got any stump questions, think of them. We can get them with hard ones. And it's going to be recorded too, so he's going to have to hang on to that forever. Right? True. Okay, so first question. Well, not really a question, but a request. You've been with us a few times, but not everybody knows who you are.
Especially over here.
Or some may have forgotten exactly. So tell us a little bit about who you are and who ERI is. And I'm even using the abbreviation. They don't even know what that is. So tell us a little bit about that first.
I've been in the pro-life movement full-time since I was 18. I turned down a professional music career to do this instead because there's a lot of great musicians and not a lot of great young pro-life speaker guys. I've always been passionate about apologetics, about helping people to have good conversations. But it was only, I guess, about 4 years ago that my brother's a philosophy grad from Biola. We got together for about a week, about 4 years ago, to try to write a book. And instead of writing a book, we ended up dreaming up ERI, which is Equal Rights Institute, to the nonprofit that we started about 6 months later. And then what we do is we train pro-life advocates to think clearly, reason honestly, and argue persuasively. And what that ends up meaning is that we end up helping people in the areas of practical dialogue tips and relational apologetics and philosophy, using speaking and writing. And we have a course now. We do campus outreach, trying to help people. How do you have more productive, gracious conversations with pro-choice people? What would it look like if Jesus talked to a pro-choice person? I want to help pro-life people to get closer to that mark, and I want to help all the pro-life people to get closer to that mark if I can possibly get a chance. And so I'm full-time leading that organization. We've got about to be 4 full-time staff and about a half dozen either part-time or independent contractors that are helping us, and so it's growing. And I'm really, really excited.
With ERI, is it a local focus? You're here in Charlotte. Is it a national, international? How are you guys kind of focused?
I think of it as a national organization. We moved to Charlotte a year and a half ago because you guys have a way better airport and you're in a better time zone than we were in California, where I was doing a lot of traveling. It's the way jet lag works. It's the worst way to do it. And so we moved to Charlotte just to move our headquarters. But I think of us as a national organization. We do occasional international stuff. I'm about to do my third, Canada speaking tour thing. I'm about to go to Denmark in like 4 or 5 months to do some stuff over there. So every once in a while we spread out. But for the most part, we're in America and trying to help those people have better conversations. And we'll see what happens as we go international.
And you are married?
I am married. I've got 3 kids. We have 3 boys, 9, 7, and 5. And so, yeah. My parents did the most loving thing they could possibly do the other day, which is they took all the kids and they took them to Atlanta. And so my wife and I just had a lovely weekend hanging out in Asheville, and now we're here. And yeah, so we're having a good weekend. But usually it's pretty loud and crazy, and yeah.
Awesome. So let me ask you this. So you talked about, even right there, about relational apologetics, talking to people. So I'm pro-life, but I hate conflict. I don't like to offend people. So basically, I never talk about my pro-life convictions. I'm pro-life, but I don't talk about it because it's a very controversial topic. How do I get over that fear? What do I do?
You can talk about this in ways that are not really obnoxious. So that would be the first thing, is to figure out the non-obnoxious ways to talk about abortion. I think that's true of any issue. There's people who talk about their faith in really obnoxious ways, and then there are other people who talk about their faith in ways that cause other people to want to be more like them. So you want to be on that side of the spectrum. So if you haven't taken our course, we've got a course on that that's really good, Equip for Life. So if you go to equipcourse.com, got a really good course on that. So that would be the first thing, is I'd be looking at Like, there's a certain aspect of this message that's offensive as it is, just inherently. It's an emotional topic for a lot of people, and understandably so. So I like this thing that Greg Koukl said a long time ago. He said, the gospel message is offensive enough, let's not add offense to it. So that's kind of our approach. I'm not saying to pretend like there's nothing offensive about it, just don't be off-putting. And then I'd be looking for ways to have those conversations in like a context where people feel emotionally safe. And so a lot of times when our team is doing R&D, we're going on to college campuses. We're just at Davidson a couple of weeks ago. Had a couple of days there. That was it's pretty rough. That campus was not super excited about us being there. But we learned a lot of things. I think we've got like 7 blog posts that are going to come out of those 2 days.
Oh, wow.
That we're going to be putting out. And so when we go on a college campus, that's our lab. We're trying new things out that we can add to the course later or write in blog posts or podcasts. It's kind of like we're trying out a bunch of stuff and trying to figure out what works best. And then all the people who follow us, you want the secrets, you want the stuff that we're figuring out, we'll let you know, kind of a thing. And so yes, you can have conversations on college campuses, but I think usually once you're an adult, I mean, you might be able to like partner up with the Students for Life Club and do outreach every once in a while, but generally that's not going to be the way it goes. It's going to be more like your conversation with your friend. Like you should pull up that email. So we were talking about relational apologetics for the last week of the 9-week series. What I mean by that phrase is the art of cultivating friendships with people who are different from you. So you can see big change happen in that context, but also you have a really good opportunity to love someone who's different from you, which doesn't necessarily always come naturally to us. I think we ought to be getting outside of our kind of comfort zones, if you will. And so I talked a lot about kind of the goal would be, can you get to where you can be having coffee once or twice a month with a friend of yours who differs from you on at least one issue. Probably will be a lot of issues. You could be talking about all of them. But Eric had this amazing draft of here's my attempt at an email to you. You actually emailed this to a friend, and it's so good. So I want you to read that, and I also want you to read the response that he sent.
Sure. So this is a guy who I know through the F3 circles. I work out with him, and we've gotten to know each other through that. But I had seen on Facebook where he had posted some pretty just vehement things about pro-life people and our obnoxiousness and that sort of thing, and so kind of a defense of women's rights and all that. So I approached him probably a year ago and said, I would love to talk with you about that a little bit. And he just didn't want to do it. He's like, I don't want to get into argument about this kind of stuff. And I said, I don't want to argue, I just want to chat. Anyway, it just didn't go great. And so he said, well, maybe. And then he said, I'll get back to you, and never did. And I let it drop, and I didn't pursue it any further, but it was still in the back of my mind. So after doing this class, I was like, he's my one application. We challenged everybody. How many were in here for at least one of the focus classes for the Equip for Life? Okay, so about maybe 40% of us. How many of you would say it made at least some sort of difference in how you approached this topic and impacted you? Awesome. One of the takeaways from the class was have a conversation with one person who is, you think, pro-choice to talk about this. Have some dialogue with them. So this was my email to him. I said, hey, got a question for you. A while back, I had mentioned the idea of the two of us sitting down to discuss our thoughts about abortion. I'm writing you now to tee that idea back up and hoping that you'll say yes. I've been taking a class that has been geared toward having great conversations with people who think differently about controversial topics. And one of the assignments is to literally have at least one conversation with an actual person about a controversial topic. All too often, people on different sides, in quote, of a topic like abortion spend all their time defending their own view and criticizing opposing views without actually listening to and learning from people who have differing views. I want to be a person who listens and learns. Will you help me do that? I'd like to buy you breakfast, lunch, or just a cup of coffee sometime and learn from your views on this. What do you say? He emailed back. He says, sounds like a good idea. And I sent this very prayerfully and fear and trembling, just hoping it would go well. He said, I would also like to better understand where people are coming from. Can we schedule something, yada, yada. So anyway, we're meeting on the 29th. So we're meeting not this coming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. We actually settled on a beer, so we're going to meet for beer instead.
It works. That's great. That's probably better.
Not 6 beers, because then they'll be like, oh, what do you mean? You liar!
1 or 2 is probably better than coffee. There's a window there.
There's a point of diminishing return. It's like, yeah, okay. Well, then he emails me back out of the blue. This was the cool part, too. He said, he goes to a church. I think he goes to an Episcopalian church. But he said, I would like to make an additional request. I think we can both learn from each other in our meeting in a month and beyond. I'm in the middle of a Bible study, and I appreciate and value your perspective on things. I would like to also talk with you about my experience so far, as well as periodically talk with you about questions I have. One thing my priest has encouraged is for me to be completely honest in my reflections of each reading. My goal isn't to be disrespectful. My goal is to better understand the Bible. So he wants me to indicate when I don't understand or when I don't agree with something. He told me it's the best way to learn. Would you be up for talking about what I've learned and experienced and continue to learn?
This is how it's done.
And I said,
This is how it's done.
I just want to talk about abortion.
Yeah,
No, but
so
yes.
Don't have fetus tunnel vision. You want to be able to talk about multiple things. But that's how it happens. It's those kinds of conversations for a lot of people. This is the only way they will change their mind, is in the context where they're having multiple meetings. Because even just on the topic of abortion, pro-choice people are going to have a lot of different questions. There are a lot of roadblocks between them and becoming pro-life. And basically the way that we see apologetics at ERI is taking the roadblocks out. There's some part of this where they kind of end up having to change their own mind. I don't think you actually change their mind. You're removing roadblocks. And there's some combination of two things going on. They're changing their own mind, and there's some combination where the Holy Spirit's doing something too. I don't understand exactly how all that works synergetically, but I think those two things are going on at some level. You're just getting roadblocks out. And sometimes for them, what they're needing is just to be around a non-obnoxious pro-lifer. If they've only been around obnoxious pro-lifers, then all they need is that. We've had low-hanging fruit where, we have an outreach and someone becomes pro-life, but it's like, I barely said anything. I was just nice to them and listened to her, and she became pro-life. You will meet those people. And then you also meet people who's read some pro-choice blog posts and have some arguments going on in their head, and you can walk through those with them over a long period. It's totally no pressure. Because at any point you can say, that's a great question. I need to mull over that. Let me think about it for a week and get back to you when we have our next beer, there's no pressure in the way you're doing this. And so I think a lot of times it's going to be something like that. I just had a conversation with my transgender friend who didn't think that... I'm trying to think about how to do the pronoun thing right now. This is really complicated for me. But I was going to say this person didn't think that this person would care about the pronoun thing, and then it turns out this person does. And so we just had a conversation about how I feel about the pronoun thing and the limits of free speech. And it was, for me, I had about as much fear and trepidation in that conversation than I've ever had. A few others with this person, but it's always been on this topic. I feel it's so much easier to talk about abortion than transgenderism with a transgender person. But the point is, it was a great conversation. There was a lot of open-mindedness on both sides and just learning from each other, hearing each other. If I can do that, you can do this about any conversation. It doesn't have to be obnoxious and people getting all offended.
And I do want to plug this Equip for Life course. We may do it again here at the church. I hope we do at some point. But you can go online and you can get a membership to this course. $39, I think, is a year. So $39 gives you full access to the course, full access to all the blog posts, all the podcasts, and access to a Facebook page dedicated to people who are taking this course, where if you have that conversation with somebody and they ask you a stump question, you're like, I don't know, let me get back with you. You go home, you jump on that Facebook page, and you say, hey, I just had a conversation, this was asked. It's a really safe place to have that kind of thing, and then let people chime in on, well, did you try this, or what about this? And then you can kind of think of ways to do that. If that doesn't work, I'll give you Josh's private email address.
No.
Phone number,
between the
address.
Between the videos and the podcasts, right now there's about 35 hours of content on there. So we're paying basically $1 an hour from people who've spent a lot of time doing this, trying to figure out how to have better conversations. So the deal's going to basically keep getting better as we add more podcasts. Sometimes we might have to up the price. But right now, it's a really good deal.
Equippedcourse.com. All right, let me ask you this then. So let's say I want to do this. We mentioned the email. Any other thoughts of the most effective ways we can start making conversations about abortion more common? How do we make that not so weird in our culture? Is it possible is it just this email kind of thing is the best way to do it? Have coffee? Are there other ways to just kind of broach that topic with people water cooler. It's not exactly the typical water cooler conversation. How about those Bears yesterday? By the way, what do you think about abortion?
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. We have a motto, DBW, don't be weird. That's weird. I think the way you did it is one of the best ways that I know. I don't think that has to be done in email form. I think the medium can change. I think you could have done that with that person, like in an in-person thing if you were hanging out. I think it could have been a Facebook message or a voicemail. Like, there's a bunch of different ways to get it, but like so many of the things, I almost want to do like a whole analysis of all the different, like the 10 good things that you did in that email, because there's a lot of specific things you did, and it was really, really good. You know, you express open-mindedness, you express you're wanting to learn from him and not just preach at him. So a lot of really good things about that. It makes for a great model. So I don't know a much better way to do it than that. What's hard is right now in our culture, people are talking to their own groups more and they're talking to the other groups less. Like, they've actually done scientific studies showing how little Republicans are talking to Democrats now and vice versa. It used to not be like this. It used to be a lot of crossover. People had friends from all over the political aisle. And in the last 2 years, it's gotten really, really bad. And so you've got this cultural context right now that's sort of working against you. But I think you can overcome that hurdle, because I think there are some people that, as a reaction to how awful everything is, are yearning for things to go back to this good thing, this good, healthy thing where we're learning from each other, when we're talking to each other. And so I think there's something about this email that says, can we do things differently? Mm-hmm. Can we have it not be like this? The last thing I'll say about this is there's a kind of priming the engine or priming the pumps, whatever the phrase is. I don't know. There's a phrase like that. I don't know exactly what it is. But there's kind of a free work you can be doing before you send that email, which is, you know, being very, very intentional about the way you talk about this. And even how often. Like, I don't think you ought to do a pro-life thing on Facebook like every day. I think that's obnoxious. It's weird. It's like, well, you should care about more than one thing, right? But like once a week or two, like a strategic, thoughtful blog post that pro-choice people can read, like without being like, that's not calling them pro-aborts or something obnoxious like that, but like they're actually like something that is being kind of careful, or a short video or something, and don't just share it because then it's just you like blasting. Like, you got to write the thing in the post. Like, say a little commentary, a sentence or two about what you got from this thing. What's hopefully happening is your pro-choice friends are seeing something in you, seeing an open-mindedness, seeing an interest in learning that will hopefully make them like more open to talking to you. And if you're being reformed right now, no pun intended, if you're being reformed right now and kind of like, I should do things differently, like that might mean even doing a post is like kind of I know I've come across too abrasively on certain issues in the past. I don't mean to be obnoxious, but sometimes I just get so passionate. But I think sometimes I've come across as if I'm not actually open to being wrong or open to hearing from the other side. And I promise you, I'm open to hearing from you. We did a blog post, right? Because we had a meme we made for this. Yeah, we did a blog post. I don't remember what it was called. I can find it. But we actually made a graphic that like you can share on your wall if you just want to do like the way that Tim said it, which is kind of a commitment towards the future of, I really do want to hear from you if you disagree with me, and I'm not going to treat you badly if you voice your disagreement, which is what most people are used to on Facebook, is the, you know, cats all claws out, you know, awfulness.
Okay, so we've got about, 20 people here or so. Stonebridge has about 500 adults, something like that. So one question I have is, in your opinion, how can we, as a pro-life group at this church, at Stonebridge, more effectively stir up a passion for pro-life advocacy within our walls?
Yeah.
How do we stir it up so we've got more people who want to come to something like this to learn and say, I want to learn more about that? That hunger, what are your thoughts about that?
I've got one idea, but I'll preface it with this, is like I've had some change in the way that I think about this in the last eight years or so. Where if you had had me here 8 years ago or 10 years ago, then I would have said every single one of those people down there should be here. Like, you're going to have a bigger room. You know, you're going to have to do this in the auditorium because every single Christian should be doing something about this because abortion is that bad, basically. And I do think abortion is really bad, but I've come to a place where I think sometimes there's going to be a remnant, and that's okay. I think there are some Christians that are not doing anything about abortion because there's a laziness or an apathy or an ignorance or something like that. Sometimes that does happen, or a fear of offending people or whatever. But I think there are some other people that are not doing anything about it because God actually called them to something else. And we need to keep that in mind. Like, God is calling people in this church to be active against sex trafficking. And that's okay. That is also evil. Abortion is not the only evil thing going on. And so I want to have room in the way that I think about this for not everyone's going to do something about abortion. I think there should be more people doing something about abortion. 20 out of 500 is probably not like the right ratio or something like that. But you're never going to get all 500. And that's okay, because you can do a lot with 20 or 40 or 50. As far as how to get more people excited, something we've noticed about, we work with Students for Life groups a lot, like these college clubs, sometimes high school clubs too. We'll get this thing happen where club leaders will come up to us and ask us, all right, so we've had this club going on for a year, and we only have 4 people coming to our meetings. And it's been a year of just 4 people coming to meetings. How can we recruit more people? And sometimes we'll ask something like, well, what do you do what does your club do? Like, what is do you guys do like outreaches? You do baby bottle fundraisers? Like, what are you doing? And like, well, we have meetings, and and then we kind of talk about what we're gonna do one day. And it's like that kind of thing. It's like having meetings about the next meeting. And usually they'll be doing at least a little thing. They'll do a drive for baby diapers or something like that. And it's just not that compelling to people if you're not really doing much. And so I think a lot of it is like, hey, people need to know what you're actually doing. So go and do stuff. Go and do stuff that's like awesome. And then tell people about it. And people are kind of attracted to okay, it's not just another little church group. There are so many little church groups doing a thing together, but it's mainly just in these walls. Go and do some stuff. And then just naturally, you'll tell your friends about it. If this is a part of your life, if this is your passion, it would be natural when you have your friends over for a game night or barbecue. At some point, that'll come up. It is possible. A lot of people just don't think there's anything you can do about this. A lot of Christians are just at the point where it's a weird kind of innocent apathy, where it's been going on for over 40 years. The Christian church in America thought abortion was going to end in the early 90s. In 1992, with KCV Planned Parenthood, we thought the Supreme Court was about to overturn Roe because Roe versus Wade is so badly decided. It's amazingly badly decided. And all the pro-choice lawyers agree, or not all of them, but a bunch of them agree. And then it didn't get overturned. And so I talked to a lot of Christian adults that are just well, I don't do anything about abortion because at least with whatever other thing I'm doing, at least I can make a difference there. You can't do anything with abortion because you got to show people you actually can make a difference. So friendships where you're changing people's minds or doing outreaches or sidewalk counseling, or there's a lot of different things you can do that'll make a difference. I would say show people that it's more than meetings. And then I would think the thing will grow. If you build it awesome, they will come kind of a thing.
Well, that's actually a segue right into my last question here, and then we're going to open this up for Q&A, is that first question was about how can we stir it up more within our walls. The second question is then how can we have a greater impact in our community, and kind of along with that, even broader than that, in your experience and in your convictions now, and not everybody would necessarily have to agree with this, but assuming the foundational calls to love God and our pro-choice neighbor, to be like Jesus to them.
That's good.
What do you think are the most effective ways to turn the tide of our culture toward valuing the life of the unborn more? Is it relational apologetics? Is it changing laws? Is it sidewalk counseling? Is it boycotting, things that support abortion or businesses that do? How can we have a greater impact in this culture? And what do you think is ultimately going to lead to a bigger impact of the culture in America?
All of those things. I'm not that passionate about boycotts. I've gone back and forth on boycotts. I think sometimes boycotts can be good if you're all organized and you tell the corporation why you're boycotting them. A lot of times it's just a few people just I'm not going to buy from that place anymore. But you don't tell them why, so it doesn't really make a difference. So if you can organize, there's been a few boycotts that have been really successful, but there's some obnoxious people on my Facebook feed that are you are morally obligated to boycott every single group that ever has anything to do with Planned Parenthood, and that's a really long list. This is and so I don't do that. I also really think I'm sinning either. So anyway, people can debate about that. But all those other things, relational apologetics and protests, sidewalk counseling, all those different things are good. And so a couple dots. Let me tell you 4 quick stories. I was thinking about doing this earlier. So,
and by the way, I want to say, I told Josh this before, maybe an email, but I think he can have a great influence on LifeBridge, on how we do things here. And we need to be open to learning and to saying, okay, maybe the way we're doing Life Week may not be the best way to go about this. The way we do this may not be the best way. We need to be learning as we go. So
I'm pretty excited about it right now. I'm not like sitting on this like you guys are completely screwing this up idea. I think this is pretty cool. As long as it's more than this. I spoke at a Catholic high school a long time ago. Gave a pro-life apologetics talk. It's a long time ago. This is before we had the equal rights argument, which is like the argument that we've seen changed by far the most minds. But I just gave a standard pro-life apologetics talk. Girl came up afterwards and said she became pro-life that day. Because she had never heard a good pro-life argument. Catholic girl. Had never heard a good pro-life argument. Different time, I had a student come up to me I told the story in the chorus, at a big Catholic conference. I had a booth and a kid came up to me and said, "Hey, Josh." And I was like, "Who are you again?" "Hi." Because this happens to me all the time. I'm like terrible with faces and names. Both. And so he said, "Oh, yeah, we talked a couple months ago at Fresno State. You were doing an outreach there." "I'm Ethan." So, "Oh, yeah, Ethan, I can remember you now. How's it going?" I said, "Good, I'm pro-life now." "What did it?" He said, "Oh, it's the equal rights argument. That thing that you said about how everyone's equal, I couldn't stop thinking about that. I'm pro-life now." We started 40 Days for Life. The first 40 Days for Life we did in Fresno. The second day, a girl named Ariel came up and said she had scheduled to have an abortion that day, but she didn't because she saw news clips of people on the street with Bibles in their hands praying. And that visual was all it took for her. And then a couple of years later, a woman walked up to, I wasn't there for this one, a woman walked up to one of our volunteers with a baby stroller and said, "I thought I should probably let you know what happened to me last year. You guys had 40, because we did the same time every year, same fall campaign." And she said, "I had planned to have an abortion last year with this kid, and I ended up talking to one of the volunteers, and I decided not to have an abortion. And I just realized you guys would probably like to know about that. And so here's my baby. You want a picture or something? Like, what do you want?" A speech, a dialogue on a college campus, a person just holding a Bible and praying outside of Planned Parenthood, and a volunteer who said, "I will never know exactly what to do that one." Those were 2 minds changed and 2 lives saved. So the point is, as I was thinking about this morning, there are a lot of different things that you can do that can have a huge impact on people. And you won't always know, like there's so many more lives saved at 40 Days for Life, and like they don't come up to us later. Like it was really sweet what that woman did. Like she walked downtown in the worst part of Fresno, most like crime-ridden part of Fresno, just to like show us her baby. Not everybody does that. That's okay. I actually think sometimes God shields us from the impact that we make, because then our heads would be really big. I don't know if that's true, but I kind of think that's true. That sounds right. But the point is, there's a lot of different things you can do. So I just did this event with my best friend of the pro-life movement, a guy named David B. Wright. And we did this event together. I think we're going to probably do more, because we both have these different areas of expertise, but they're very complementary. My area of expertise is one-on-one dialogue. All the other stuff, I'm not an expert on. I'm just really good at this one thing. David is an expert at a different thing that I'm not an expert on, which is coordinating adults and getting them to work together so they can go and do huge things. And that's awesome. Like, he would give you also great answers if he were here today that would be different than mine. He started 40 Days for Life, which now they've had 750,000 people get involved, saved 13,000 lives that they know of, had like 156 abortion workers leave. I forget how many clinics have closed. I think it's like between 10 and 20. It's massive what they've accomplished all over the world. He's really good at that thing. So we did a talk where I did a keynote, he did a keynote, and then we did a panel together. I think we're going to release the whole audio on our podcast feed, so you got to subscribe to our podcast. It was so cool. So anyway, the point of this keynote I thought was so good, which was basically find your lane. There were different lanes in the pro-life movement. Not everybody should do 40 Days for Life. Not everybody should do sidewalk counseling. Frankly, not everybody should do dialogue with pro-choice people. I think like most people probably can, but I've certainly met a few people that I'm like, I don't want you talking to people. You know what I mean? I don't tell them that, but it's like, I don't know if you're going to get there, kind of a thing. So go do something else. There's all kinds of awesome things you can do in the pro-life movement. We need people doing sidewalk counseling. We need people, if you're not going to be a good sidewalk counselor, it's okay to just go stand and pray in front of an abortion clinic, because, as I said, that's what caused Ariel to not have an abortion. Like, that can make a difference in and of itself. Some people just need to make a lot of money and don't need it. Like, I've got an office. Like, ERI is screwed up next year if we can't get an office, which means I got $40,000 to raise, and I don't know where it's going to come from. And so we've got some people that are like, they're making a bunch of money and giving it to us in December every year. That's awesome. We need more people like that. Volunteers. Are you good at computers? I can probably give you something to do where you could do it from home. We don't have normal volunteers. We don't stuff envelopes. All of our mailing stuff happens in California. But if you're decent with a computer and you know how many hours you could volunteer for me every week, and it's more than like one, because there's this, but basically I'm wearing too many hats right now. I could give you one of my hats, and I've done that. I've got people all over the country right now that are wearing one of my hats that I used to wear, making it so I'm freed up to do more of the things that, like writing blog posts. I don't write blog posts as often as I used to, because I'm running a ship. I'm piloting this thing and keeping everybody working. There's a lot of different things, but like, find your lane. And I think almost every lane there's sort of a dialogue plus option. I think basically, like, even if lobbying's your thing, you need to get good at dialogue. And so, like, I think what we teach, like, almost every lane, you ought to get good at that. But maybe the main thing I can do is lobbying. I know nothing about lobbying. Absolutely nothing. I don't know how the political system works, how to influence city council members. I don't know whether West Wing or House of Cards is more realistic to, like, the real world. I don't know that world at all. But there's other people who do. Awesome. Like, find those people. There's so many different things you do, but you got to find your lanes. And basically that comes down to figuring out what are you really good at and what are you passionate about. And where those things overlap on a Venn diagram, you should go and be doing that thing. Most of you can only do one or two pro-life things, really. So spend that time where you're going to make the greatest impact. And it might not be doing my thing. It might be doing a different thing, and that's okay.
That's this action card that's here. This doesn't have everything, but it's got, what is on here is
we need
learn.
A new version of this.
Read books, listen to podcasts, talk to others about abortion, be a learner. It used to have Life Report on here.
Oh, yeah.
The original one we did had it, so.
Got to put a new podcast.
But yeah, exactly. So now we got to get the new stuff on here. Anyway, this has lots, pray, learn, serve, give. Everything he said could fall under one of those areas in that way. All right. Q&A time. Who's got them? Who's got the stumper questions? This can be anything, by the way. This can be follow-up of what we've already just said, or you've got this challenging question you're wrestling with. Either somebody asked you, or you just thought this is one of your thoughts. You don't know. So, it's your turn.
Yep. Just going into a profession, I want to go into counseling, and I know in counseling, the helper cannot impose their own values onto the client. So if the client came up to me and told me that they wanted to get an abortion, how would I approach them in that without imposing them?
Yeah, I'm not going to have a great answer for you. I don't know. Like, certainly I don't think that you should. I know, right? Yeah, you're done. We're stumped. Is there a prize?
Already done.
I'm going to do question one. This guy sucks. Who brought this guy in? I certainly don't think that you should.
You get his phone.
I certainly don't think you should break ethical codes or whatever. And so I understand there's certain professions where there's just certain things you can't do. And I think that's understand. Like, this happened to me recently. It was on a much more mild version, but I was in line buying a thing at the store, and the person engaged me on a thing. Oh, we were at GameStop. I was buying an Xbox controller. There's this whole thing. I'm not going to get into it. There's this whole debate right now about microtransactions in games and this new Star Wars game coming out, and it's a really big thing right now among video game people. And there's an ethical debate about how companies who make video games ought to do things that might encourage gambling addictions of young people. And so I didn't used to care about this, and now I do. So anyway, I bought the controller from this guy, and I had just kind of mildly asked him if he was selling for me any of the games. And he's like, oh yeah, we've been selling some, and I think people are way overreacting to that whole debate. I just say, I kind of had this lame response. Really frustrated me because he was like, I understand the other side, but... And then he gave this total straw man. It was you don't understand the other side, or you wouldn't be saying that lame argument. Anyway, but now there's a line behind me, right? So it's I can either engage this guy and debate him, or I can just smile and shake his hand and leave. And that's what I did. So there's certain times where you can't say all the things, or you shouldn't say all the things that are in your head. I would want you to try to find some pro-life counselors who've already been dealing with those issues and figure out there might be certain things that you can do that are acceptable. And I just don't know anything about counseling. And so I'm just not going to tell you I'm an expert on things I'm not an expert on. find people. There's a lot of pro-life counselors. Or talk to a Christian counselor and say, there's a thing that I'm interested in. Where are the lines on something like this? And if you don't know of someone, I know of a Christian counselor that I'd be happy to hook you up with. All right? There's someone back here and then over here.
I'm sorry. I'm going to make a comment to that previous comment. As a professional, I can talk to someone, and if they ask me that question, I would say, well, I don't want to impose my views on you, but I do have some personal views, and would you like to hear them outside of my role as a counselor to you? You're asking permission to speak. You are a person, even though you're a counselor or a professional, and you just ask, you want to know my personal feelings, and it won't affect how I relate to you as a client. But if you'd like to hear those, I'd be glad to share them with you.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Are you a counselor? What's your profession?
I'm a family physician.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I would still want her to fact check that with actual counselors, because sometimes I would just wonder if their rules could be a little bit different with counselors. But yeah, it seems like that's a very reasonable thing to do.
Well, I was just going to speak one more thing to this, because as a family practice PA, I have to think through this, my morals and how I bring them about. And the other thing is, as a counselor, I think it's also a part of your role to give an unbiased, to bring options to them as well, and say, well, as you're considering that, I want to also make sure you have all the information you can about these are other options to consider and that sort of thing. And in that, your bias is probably going to come through. You're a person, as well as a counselor, and so it gives you the option for further dialogue about it as well.
One more thing. There is research out there that pro-life people have done on negative psychological effects that abortion has had on people. And I would encourage you to look into that stuff. But don't just read up kind of their stuff, get into the actual studies, how they were done. I haven't had a chance to do a very thorough survey of this stuff. My inclination from a very brief look is that some of those things, I basically agree with their conclusions a lot of times. I know women who've had abortions. I have a lot of friends who are post-abortive who have had, grief and depression, and sometimes even as much as getting suicidal over it. It makes sense, thinking about the way humans are, that people, especially Christians who have abortions, would go through significant psychological trauma. But I would encourage you to also double-check the studies, because I think sometimes the studies where there's a statistic given, here's the percentage of women who go through X, Y, and Z. A lot of times I've seen those studies aren't based on enough people to really give you a very good... So you got to be really careful here and just check into the research. And I'm not saying that there are no big studies. There's been a really big meta-study recently on the breast cancer link, and so I think that there's a lot of valid stuff there. The psychological stuff, just double check. At some point, I want to have a really good, I've looked into all of this stuff, and it's just not my priority right now. But anyway, you had a question.
Maybe this is a bit manipulative, but it came to my mind that perhaps, if I'm buying a whole lot of baby diapers or something to give to the pregnancy center, and just by chance somebody from Walmart or wherever strikes up a conversation, I think I would probably keep it real short and sweet. That was an idea that came to me.
I think if it happens, it's cool. I don't get into that many conversations like that. As long as it's not weird and uncomfortable for people. And so there's a version of this where the person kind of wants to go and you're kind of hanging on and kind of not so obviously don't do that. But yeah, if you're this awesome extrovert who just knows how to get right into conversations with people, totally. God wired you in a way that he didn't wire me, which is great. I'm really good at the one-on-one thing, but I don't know how to do that thing that apparently you know how to do. So,
well,
cool.
I really don't know how to do it. It just happens.
Okay. So get trained up in how to have these dialogues, and then, because it sounds like God's handing you the opportunities, the question is, I think of it sometimes as an instrument in God's hands. I think of myself as a guitar, and God can play whatever he wants.
Right.
And I kind of think of my job as being trying to stay tuned up. Yeah. Because the music's a lot prettier when we had a tuned guitar between and a not very tuned guitar.
Right.
So your job is to get yourself tuned up. Get ready for those conversations. And then let God do whatever he's going to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can still also be looking for those opportunities. You don't want to completely leave it in God's hands. I think sometimes he'll just prompt something to happen. It'll just a conversation falls into your lap. Sometimes we have to take initiative. And so obviously be also looking for those opportunities where you need to do a little something to make that happen. But yeah, I think that's great. Over here in the corner again.
I didn't attend the classes earlier, but I don't want to cheapen your 35 hours, of course, but is there 60 seconds that you could give how to what
60 seconds?
Yeah, Don Rothwell actually asked to get it down to a 3x5 card as well. So I actually have a 6-page summary of the course that is available for you. Anybody who wants it.
Take my crack at
There
it.
you go.
I wrote up a soundbite. There's a Republican politician that asked me to do like a soundbite. I don't remember exactly what it was. I know it's on the blog. It's like a 30-second soundbite. It's basically something along the lines of something I care a lot about is human equality. I think people should be treated equally, at least in the sense of an equal right to life. And so when I think about why that is, I think there's something that we all have in common that grounds that equality. It's not just something that the government gives us. It's an actual thing that we have regardless of whether the government recognizes it. So it's a natural right, not one given to us by the government. So it can't be taken away. It's an inalienable right. And when I think about why we have that, I think that the thing that we have in common that matters is something like humanness, is being human, which means I think all humans should have an equal right to life. And I think the unborn have that thing, have that property. They're human also. And so I think they should have the right to life regardless of what our kind of natural intuitions are. Sometimes our intuitions are just wrong. There have been a lot of people with just really, in the long, sad history of the human race, have had really faulty intuitions about who matters. And I would rather say everyone matters, even if our intuitions don't go that way, that you better have really good justification for saying that someone is not a person or does not have a right to live. And I have not yet heard a very good pro-choice reason for saying that the unborn don't matter. There's more like 60, but something along those lines. But I have to say this. Some of the tools that we teach are a little bit more complicated, and that's because I think in general sometimes we actually think that there are some pro-choice arguments that are just more complicated than some pro-life people have given them credit for. We don't teach that many sound bites. We teach a few in the course. But for the most part, what we're trying to teach is how do you accurately understand the really smart pro-choice arguments and respond to them carefully. Like a really smart pro-choice argument deserves a very thoughtful response. And so that means that it's just not going to be as easy as a 60-second thing. Like, if I said that 60 seconds, which is pretty good. That was pretty good what I just did there. As soon as they respond with, yeah, but it's in her body, and she shouldn't be forced to be hooked up to other people. Okay, I now need probably at least 5 minutes. And that's me, like, distilling down hard, nuanced thought experiments in a pretty expert way to pull off in only 5 minutes. And so I just want to caution us not to oversimplify this issue, but to see, like, there are some really complicated arguments. Let's take them seriously. Not all the pro-choice arguments are complicated. There's some pretty lame bumper sticker slogans out there, and you can respond to them pretty quick. But there's also some really smart pro-choice people, and I want us to be able to respond to even those people.
You say, I don't know if this is true, that most pro-choice people believe that a baby is a human being, but the woman's right to choose trumps that. And they haven't really drilled into the consequence of saying it's a human being, but still it's okay to kill it. Is that?
I would say it a little bit differently, but you're not far off. So the phrase human being, you won't see ERI use the phrase human being much because the phrase is vague. We try to say, like, member of the human species. We're keeping the, like, there's a biological side of this, which I think is what you meant. Yeah, so usually pro-lifers say human being, that's what they mean. Pro-choice people, they say human being and person synonymously sometimes, so it gets confusing. But yes, I think most pro-choice people today think that the unborn is living and, like, is biologically alive and is biologically a member of the species. There are two major disagreements between pro-choice and pro-life people, and one of them is the next stage, which is more philosophical. Does the unborn have value like you and I do? We have intrinsic value. There's something, great that is lost if a person is killed. And so I don't think most pro-choice people think the unborn have that. They think it'll have it maybe halfway through pregnancy or maybe at birth. But that's one big difference. They think it's alive, but it's not a living thing that matters yet. But then there's this other thing, which you did get to, and I'm so glad you did, which is, I think, is maybe even more like what's going on for pro-choice people, like a more important part of their worldview, which is that even if pro-lifers are right that it is a person, she can still have an abortion because we shouldn't force people to be hooked up to other people. Like, it's an invasion of bodily autonomy. The government shouldn't have the right to hook you up to other people just so that they can live. It's too much to ask of someone, and we certainly shouldn't put people in jail for that. Now, those are the two big areas where we need to discuss. I basically agree that there are certain things the government shouldn't force you to do with your body. And so we have a lot of common ground on bodily autonomy. Exactly how we cash that out and, when you're with child, like what changes there, those are kind of the areas that we're talking about. And so you got two areas of disagreement. Is the unborn a person, and should the government force women to stay pregnant if they don't want to be pregnant or not? And I think there's a dual argument going on. I think of it as like personhood is the thing they'll usually bring up first sometimes. Actually, this isn't even always true anymore because bodily rights slogans are really easy. My body, my choice is really easy. But even if, like, for them, they often feel like even if you convince them on personhood, which you might with, like, the equal rights argument, they have a bodily rights safety net underneath. And so they feel very confident about their pro-choice views. You need to be able to deal with both of these, usually, if you're going to get them to be pro-life.
In your opinion, if you were to give a State of the Union address on the status of the pro-life movement in America and the culture, like what's the wind of the culture right now when it comes to this? 60-second State of the Union address.
60 seconds?
Soundbite. No, where are we in this? People talk about the war on abortion. Yeah. Are we winning or losing? That kind of thing. And there you're automatically putting sides.
Yeah.
So how would you? Where are we culturally in this?
There's some
is
good.
Abortion going to end in 2017?
No. Abortion's not going to end in 2017 unless God takes away free will and just like makes the Supreme Court overturn Roe or something like that. Like I don't think God's going to do that. So I think there's some things to be really optimistic about, and there are some things to cause us fear and trepidation. The fear and trepidation part a lot is what I talked about. Like right now, culturally, we're not talking to each other. That's very, very bad. It's hard to change people's minds if you can't talk to them or if they're not willing to listen to you. And so identity politics has put us in a really bad place right now. I'm hopeful that it can get better. A lot of the atheist philosopher types that I listen to a lot are like almost all unified that identity politics is a really bad thing and that people should talk to each other, that freedom of speech is really important. And so basically what I'm hoping is that one day looking back, we're going to see that our culture did a kind of a pendulum swing. And there are multiple things that have caused the pendulum to swing this far, this way. Trump is part of it. It's not just Trump, but he's certainly a part of it. Some of it is a reaction to Trump. And then there's other stuff that was going on before Trump, that there is motion already going that way. And I'm hoping it doesn't get much worse. I'm hoping that basically, especially the atheists and leftists that disagree with this way of doing things, will help pull people back and say, okay, you've gone too far. Like at the point where you're punching people, this is not okay, regardless of what side you're on, whether you're the KKK or Antifa. At the point where we're being violent, like this is a problem. We should be able to talk to each other. We should be able to do what Daryl Davis does. He goes around, he's a black guy, amazing blues musician, and befriends KKK members and gets them out of the KKK. Because it's hard to be in the KKK when you're not friends with a black guy. It's just hard. So much of racism is just ignorance. Like you don't have any black friends. When you start eating with black people or seeing them play the piano in ways that probably only 50 people on the planet can do right now, like Daryl Davis can, it's hard to be racist. So that's part of it. But then for the optimistic side, I have hope in a way that I didn't like 5 years ago. And the reason for that is because I work a lot more with young pro-lifers now. Our work is so much more with high schoolers and college students than people this is outside the norm for us. I love when church groups take our course, but where we're putting a lot of our, time and resources is young people, because I'm playing a long game. I want to train up the next generation of pro-life leaders so that by the time they take over the pro-life movement in 20 years, they don't have some of the bad habits and bad attitudes and things that sometimes are going on, but not always. There's a lot of really good things going on in the pro-life movement right now. It's kind of cool among really young pro-life leaders to basically say they're everything is bad in the pro-life movement. It's just a train wreck, and we need to start wipe the slate clean and start over. And we are the new shiny light, and we're going to be the best thing. That's not my attitude. 40 Days for Life. 250,000 volunteers, 13,000 babies saved, 150 abortion workers left. There's a lot of awesome stuff going on in the pro-life movement. Could we get better at communicating? Yes, we could definitely get better at communicating. Can we get more effective? Can we get to where our organizations are doing a better job of having measurable goals and actually tracking? Is the stuff that we've usually been doing for the last 20 years actually making a big difference, or should we completely change tack? Yes, we could generally get better at that. I want to see people get better at that. But when I'm around young people, I've been speaking at the Students for Life conference the last several years. I'm speaking there again in D.C. this next year. It's 2,000-3,000 college students, pro-life college students. They're passionate. and they're smart. They're learning from the last generation of pro-lifers of what works and what doesn't. They're more, on average, interested in measuring their results and even looking outside to other movements to see what's been effective in the gay rights movement, what's been effective in some of these other things, and see how can we kind of, instead of just doing the same thing for 40 years, what should we have been doing that we've never been doing before? That's something we're excited about. We're excited about being innovative and flexible. Like, we're not just going to say the same arguments we've always been saying. The girl became pro-life at the Catholic high school. I don't teach hardly anything now that I said in that speech that made her pro-life. Like, I've got better stuff now, and almost that entire 30 minutes has been redone. But that's okay. So I've got a lot of hope, but it's going to be a marathon and not a sprint. It's going to be at least another decade, and probably more. It's a Supreme Court issue. You need 6 justices and not 5 on your side. Clark Forsyth makes this point in Politics for the Greatest Good. I know more than a minute now. I'll wrap up. I see you over there. But Politics for the Greatest Good is a really good book by a really smart pro-life guy who understands the legislative process at a level that I never will. Explain about prudence and what the virtue of prudence is, and how William Wilberforce and Abraham Lincoln and some other people had it. And he talks about no one's going to want to be the swing justice on a case like that. You have to have 6 on your side. We're not there yet. And so right now, we are playing a long chess game. I'm teaching my son chess. Almost every day now we play chess. And it's really, really fun. And I'm trying to teach him to be playing the long game, to be figuring out where do you need to kind of get your pieces set up so that then you can actually win the war and not just a quick battle. And then, he'll be like, ooh, I can take his bishop and then I take his queen. Like, it's like I keep on teaching him these lessons. So, like, the pro-life movement, I think, is getting better at figuring out it's going to take a while because of the Supreme Court case. And then once Roe is overturned, it's going to go back to the states. And every state's going to have to decide. Some of them have already decided, already have constitutional amendments. We're going to either be pro-life or pro-choice. A lot of them don't. This is going to be a thing. We're going to look back. It's going to be hundreds of years before we look back at this the way we look at slavery. I hope one day we get there and we can be a part of that movement that was working with Wilberforce to make this thing unthinkable. But we have a long way to go. But I'm optimistic because we can do so much better than a lot of what we've done in the past. And anytime that's true, anytime you see that you can get a lot better or do things that haven't been done before, there's a lot of reason for hope. So I have hope.